You're listening to the ADHD Support Talk Radio podcast. ADHD Support Talk is brought to you by addclasses.com. Visit www.addclasses.com and sign up for free webinars and online events today.
Hello, welcome back to ADHD Support Talk Radio. I'm your co-host, Lynne Edris, and as a productivity coach, I empower professionals to take control of their time and their lives so that they can fulfill their potential and have more time and energy for what matters most to them. I am a woman with ADHD myself, guys, so I have been where so many of you guys are, and I like to say I've come out the other side, so to speak. So ADHD doesn't go away, absolutely. I didn't learn some magic cure or magic solution, but I sure have learned how to live well with it. So I've gone from that constant chaos and overwhelm and underperformance to a life of more success and fulfillment than I once dreamed was possible. And I know you can share the same success yourself. You can learn more about me and what I do and the programs and services I offer at www.coachingadvantages.com. And when you text the keyword hack, HACK, to 33777, I'll send you my 7 foolproof productivity hacks to help you add hours of free time to your weeks by investing a few smart minutes each day. So I have with me my co-host and founder of ADHD Support Talk, Tara McGillicuddy. Welcome, Tara.
I am glad to be back. And like Lynn said, I'm the co-host. I'm also a woman with ADHD myself. And I help people shift their energy to help improve productivity and to overall improve their lives. You can learn more about me by going to taramcgillicuddy.com.
Awesome. Well, Tara and I are going to talk about something I think just about all of us could use some help on at any time. And I was going to say especially now, but I think at any time is absolutely appropriate. We're going to talk about managing distractions. This is a big one for everyone. Of course, life is full of distractions, but when you have ADHD and you have a deficit in your ability to regulate your attention, managing distractions is really important, right? So remember, guys, ADHD is not actually a deficit of attention. Sometimes we have plenty of attention, right? Sometimes we have a surplus of attention. The deficit is in our ability to regulate our attention. So learning to manage distractions intentionally and proactively and effectively is really important. This is something I really preach about a lot. And this is something I work on a lot with my clients because most of us don't think enough about this, right? Managing distractions, preventing them, doing what we can to make them less impactful. I mean, is that something that I know it's something that I struggle with myself personally? I'm sure, Tara, you do as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big things is first realizing what is distracting you, becoming aware or mindful of the things that are distracting you. And I think a lot of us, myself included, we just kind of blow them off or we beat ourselves up and we're not even realizing the practical things or the things in general that are distracting us.
Absolutely. So it really is about being mindful. I almost said paying attention to what's distracting you, but it really is, right? Paying attention to noticing, being aware of intentionally when you need to manage distractions, when you need to have focus, right? Because you don't need to have a ton of focus for everything. Things that are more automatic, things that require less executive function processing, things that you can kind of do with other stuff going on in the background aren't necessarily the kinds of things you need to be concerned about in terms of managing distractions. So if I'm folding laundry, I'm not real worried about managing distractions. And in fact, I'm going to be looking for something else. I always call it to dilute the laundry. I don't really like folding laundry. It's not something I enjoy. So I'm much more likely to do it. And I'm going to do it much more easily if I have maybe a podcast episode going on in the background or something on TV that I enjoy watching. But if you're trying to do something or you need or want to do something that requires any amount of focus, that's not a good idea, right? So I talk a lot with my clients about what we call attention residue when it comes to multitasking. most of us with ADHD wear multitasking like it's a badge of honor. And I think, in fact, most people in Western society talk about multitasking like it's a badge, they wear it like a badge of honor. But the truth of the matter is your brain can only pay attention to one thing at a time. You can only focus on one thing truly at any given time. So when you're multitasking, you're actually switching back and forth between the things that you're paying attention to quickly. And what happens when you're trying to focus on something is you build up what we call attention residue. So attention residue is basically your brain holds on to one thing you were focused on briefly for much longer while you're trying to focus on the second thing. So if you're trying to think of an example, if I'm listening to a podcast while I'm writing something, right, both of those things are using my language processing kind of parts of my brain. So they're kind of competing for the same attention. They're competing for the same part of my brain. If I'm switching back and forth, my brain is switching from listening to the podcast to writing whatever. The thing that I've kind of moved away from attention wise. So if I go from the podcast and then I go back to focusing on writing a sentence, the podcast, that first thing is still hanging out in my brain. And studies show that the thing that you are multitasking with takes a much more focus, a much more kind of brain space than we think it does, and for much longer, because your brain thinks it's an open loop.
Yeah. So you're going to be more productive. You're going to have, a better outcome. You're going to produce something better if you say, okay, I'm going to focus on this one thing for, let's just say 10 minutes. I'm going to try my best. Things might come in and out. We might get a little bit distracted, but yeah, that multitasking is not effective with most things.
Right. And that's an important thing to pay attention to, right? There are certain I can wash dishes and have the TV on, no problem. And in fact, it might make it easier for me to wash dishes because it's boring.
Yeah.
But if whatever it is, the two things that you're trying to do at the same time use the same kind of focus, the same kind of, attention, the same kind of processing, those things are going to compete.
Yeah.
So really paying attention to, what you need to have focus for, if that makes sense. Grammatically, I'm not sure it did, but really paying attention to, what kind of focus do I need and what kinds of things would be okay in the background.
Yeah. And I think you're someone, whether it's dishes or laundry, that you've decided I'm going to do the dishes, I'm going to do the laundry, where someone like myself and probably other people listening might start doing the dishes, might start doing the laundry and just really hate it. And something might take my attention away, and that's going to take me away from doing the dishes or the laundry or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really important to know, or to question and realize, become aware of the distractions. Are they going to help you? Whereas you might get distracted by something, or something might come in while you're doing the dishes that might be helpful to you, and it might not be helpful to me. It might distract me and move me away from the dishes. So I think that's something really important to understand, how your brain works and all the other stuff that's going on.
Absolutely. Right. So when I always think of it in terms of, and I'm not sure I love this word, but I think of it in terms of intentionality. So if my intention right now is to do the dishes, there are lots of things that could potentially distract me, especially if it's something like dishes or something that I don't enjoy. And, for dishes, insert anything that you don't enjoy, anything that you want to avoid, anything that your mind is going, oh, please don't make me, right? That's the kind of like the the yucky stuff. It could be anything. So really being intentional right out of the gate and clear about, this is what I'm going to be focused on right now. And depending on what it is, I don't usually need to do this for dishes, but for other kinds of things I do. I will actually literally write down on a sticky note, like right now, I'm writing a podcast episode. I'm not surfing the web. I'm not like getting lost in social media as I tell myself that I need to do some research or whatever, so that I have that pre-decided, this time is for this is what I'm focusing on. And then anything that comes up, I plan ahead, because I know me. I plan ahead for, what am I going to do with the distractions that are internal? right?
Mhm.
The thoughts that pop up, the memories that pop up, the ideas that pop up. Sometimes it could be oh crap, to do, right? I need to take care of this thing, or I don't want to forget this thing. So I plan ahead, and I always, when I'm going to be focused on anything, I've always got a little pad right beside me for, I call them the pop-ups, right? So I have a place to capture that stuff. I call it catch and release, right? I can
Mhm.
capture it, I can write it
Yep.
down, and then I can get right back to whatever it is that I'm focused on at the moment. What's a little bit tricky about that I see with clients is my sort of policy for myself with my catch and release pad that I keep handy when I'm focused on something is, as soon as I'm done whatever it is that I'm focused on, then the stuff that I wrote down needs to like get into my system somewhere.
Mhm.
If I did not have that policy, I would have, 50,000 lists of things to do, just randomly collected, all over my office and probably all over my life. So that's an important, that distinction between where do you want to be focused right now and what are you going to do with the distractions? So
Yeah.
that internal ones are, that's part of ADHD, right?
Yeah.
It's the stuff kind of popping in and out all the time. And then what are you going to do with the external ones?
Yeah. So having some type of system or ideas in place for what you are going to do when the distractions come up, because they're gonna hit you more in depending on what's going on in your life. They might come at you more than others. And you gave an example of your system,
Right.
and that's great. That might be something that works for you, but somebody listening might use your system and tweak it, or they might do something else. But just knowing, okay, distractions are going to come up. What am I going to do with these distractions? And for most things,
Absolutely.
you write them down. But if somebody's, sick, if there's an emergency, that distraction might be something you act on. But what are
Absolutely.
the things, like, what are your boundaries when it comes to distractions? I think that's a big one. What are your boundaries, and what are you going to do with those boundaries?
That's a really good point, right? Because there are distractions that will come at you internally. There are distractions that will come at you externally. And at any given moment, like, you don't always have the luxury to say, I'm not going to pay attention to this thing, or I'm not going to deal with this thing right now. So if your boss walks in and he wants something or she wants something from you
Yes.
now, or at least just wants your attention for a moment, and you're in the middle of something else, that's something else you have to plan for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how are you going to, I call it like creating a bookmark. I have different phrases. I call it like leaving yourself a trail of breadcrumbs. So you're going to be interrupted, whether it's your kids, your partner, a text message, a telephone, somebody else walking into your office, could be anything. You have to decide, how am I going to leave myself some clues?
Yes.
Again, a trail of breadcrumbs. How am I going to get myself back to where I am right now?
Yeah.
So that's a really important part for me, right? Like, how are you going to bookmark what you're doing and what you need to think about to pick back up after the interruption?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I see a lot. And I remember this when my kids were little. Really young kids understand, hold on a second. They might not like it, but that 15 seconds, 30 seconds that it takes you to leave yourself a note or jot down some information, so future you knows, where to pick back up, can make a world of difference when you have ADHD.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And it might be writing things down if that's how you process, but some people might just take their phone and set out a voice memo, or I'm sure there's different types of apps. So that's another thing to pay attention to. How do you process? What are you going to come back to the most? Is it going to be a sticky? Is it going to be something on your phone? Are you going to set up a reminder to come back at a end of each day or end of each hour, whatever it is? Because you gave some great things, but part of the system is not only like capturing it, maybe not necessarily writing it down, but also going back to what you captured on a regular basis and following up with it, or deciding what to do with it.
And making sure it doesn't just become one more something that you have notes captured on, right?
Yes.
And that's the word capture is the word that I always use when I'm teaching like task management and calendar management and all of that stuff, because for me, I have a combination of paper and electronic systems, because that's what works for me. You have to do what works for you, right? So paying attention to how am I most likely going to use this thing? Like what feels easiest? And then what am I going to want to remember in the future? right? How can I hook future me up to make it easier to jump back in? And is it a paper note? Is it, a reminder app of some sort, or an electronic document that you put a note in your calendar to come back to at a certain point, so you don't forget that it even existed, or, it's about setting up your processes.
And this takes some practice. It can take some time, because by default, the way our brains naturally work, we're like the hunters. We're scanning. We want to act on, I don't know if we necessarily want to act on things right away. That's just what usually happens. That's our nature.
That impulse.
Yeah. So this can take some time, some practice, and there might be some frustration at first when you decide, I'm going to capture it. I'm going to create a system. So I think that's something to be aware of. It's okay to be frustrated, that it might not, become natural the first 8 times.
No, or the first, 50 times, right? But pay attention. That's part of the, paying attention to what is easy for you, paying attention to what makes sense for you, how you process information, how you organize things naturally, kind of how you work. Even those things we think of as quirks and idiosyncrasies are all parts of your strengths. And anytime you can lean on your strengths and natural tendencies, you're going to make things easier. But that doesn't mean that, if you're not really tuned into what those strengths are, it's going to be easy for you right out of the gate to pick up on something and make it work for you right away. So be nice to you, right? Give yourself some grace, tinker, analyze. I always encourage my clients to keep like an engineering perspective,
like
play with
detach from it. Detach from the emotion of it. I know it's easier said than done, because I'm a very sensitive person. I take everything personally. But if you can get into that detachment, that like analytical research mode, and be like, okay, this is what happened. If I was changing it for someone else, what would I recommend for them?
Right. Absolutely. And what works for me elsewhere, right? What do I do in other parts of my life that might be working better? And how can I adapt it to this? I mean, you do have to go into an analytical mode. You do have to give yourself permission to let go of the, I don't like the word failure, but that's how it feels sometimes when something doesn't work for you. Let go of that and know that it's all part of kind of gathering data, right? It's all part of figuring it out. But I think the big thing when it comes to managing distractions is being proactive, being clear, and being intentional, right? Knowing what you're about to focus on, making sure you're clear on that, really being proactive, thinking about, okay, what am I going to do with how do distractions get in my way typically? Are they coming from the outside? Is it stuff that pops up in my mind? What am I going to do with that stuff? Right? So that you're clarifying your expectations for yourself, but also for other people. Do you need to communicate those expectations with someone else? If you're working from home, do you need to tell your kids you need an hour, you need 45 minutes, or your partner or your roommate or somebody else? Or if you're in an office, do you need to train your team that when your door is closed, they need to come back unless it's an emergency? So really getting clear expectations of yourself and everyone else around you. And then, being proactive, plan ahead a little bit.
Yes.
What kinds of things usually tend to get in your way? Are you like me where, if I'm going, for focused work where I've got to create something or do something that requires any sustained focus and attention, or something that feels hard for me, I'm turning off all my notifications. I'm silencing my phone, not just silencing it, but research has shown that even if your phone is off and you can see it, it still impedes your focus. So putting it in a drawer and closing the drawer, it's something weird to get used to. Turning off all the notifications, closing all the browser tabs. That's a big one for me, because I've always got at least 15 or more browser tabs open. So I've got to close all the browser tabs other than the one I'm working in, and, turning off the email, all of that kind of stuff. But really knowing you and being proactive to take a better kind of control of it.
Yes, definitely.
Anything else that you want to add?
I think the biggest one that I want to reiterate and talk about again is having patience with yourself.
Yes.
That this is a process, and you have good days, bad days, and life happens. Sometimes you get major distractions that are just going to take you away no matter what, and you need to reevaluate. But be patient with yourself.
Yes.
And just start becoming aware. If you can detach, that's great. Aware of how the distractions are really affecting you and what they are.
And if that's something that you need to work on, something that you need to focus on, I mean, allowing yourself a little bit of time on a regular basis to reflect on what's working and what's not working. So you're also paying attention to what's working as much as what's not working is really important, because we tend not to do that. So that's one of the things that when I have a client that's working on something specific as managing distractions would be making sure that every day you look back real quickly and just think about, like, what was an example of a time when I did this well today? Okay.
Yes.
I turned my phone off and I put it away for 45 minutes while I was working on whatever, or 20 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. That was a good thing that helped me. That's going to give you more stuff to work with going forward than, today was crap and I got pulled off task, or I distracted myself, or, whatever didn't go as well. That whole making sure you're paying attention to what's working is a really important part.
That's very good.
Yeah. So hopefully we gave you some things to think about. Hopefully we gave you some ideas. If you want to keep the conversation going, or you have questions about this or ideas you want to share, please join us in the ADHD Support Talk Facebook community. What else? I just had a brain freeze. Speaking of distractions, I think that's it.
Yeah.
As always, we appreciate your attention. Thanks for listening. And please join us in the ADHD Support Talk community on Facebook. We'd love to get to know you and get your suggestions and your ideas. Thanks so much for joining me again this time, Tara, and we'll see you all again soon.
Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye.